Hi, welcome to our show. Got a pretty cool project we're going to do today. It incorporates a lot of different elements. So this is the finished product. So this is a present for my daughter for her wedding, her and her fiance. So it's a picture. So interesting thing is incorporates, actually did a 35 millimeter black and white picture using P3200 high-speed black and white film. And so took the picture last December. Has Christmas lights and stuff behind it. But so I came up with this idea. What I wanted to do was have the build a frame, have the actual print, so the black and white pictures here. In the middle we have the actual negative from the print that we did the picture on, and then finally we also have a lithophane on the far end of that picture. So when you hold this up to the light, and we'll show some pictures on here too of when you hold that up to the light, it doesn't look like much from here, but when the light shines through, comes through. So kind of some neat different technologies involved. Obviously old film photography. We use the 3D printer, the resin printer, to do the lithophane for cutting out the layers like you see here, and then also the back side. So there's 3 layers of the 5 millimeter plywood in here. So those 3 layers were all cut out on the laser, and then finally the actual frame was made by hand. So we did that using regular woodworking tools and stuff. So we'll kind of go through the steps we did and show the final assembly of it. Really excited with how it turned out. Hope this inspires you or gives you some ideas on some things you could do. And let's get going. We're now going to use the miter trimmer here. This thing looks really old, but you can actually still buy these. Grizzly, Rockler, a lot of different places carry these. Just do a Google search for miter trimmer, picture frame trimmer, a lot of different things they're called, but this is a really neat tool. All manual, obviously, and basically the way this thing works is you've got a nice, really rigid, really sharp V blade on here. You've got a big metal handle, slides in the back, and all you do is you move this handle back and forth. I'll show you the gearing on the back here. So it literally just shaves off little bits of wood. It's not for cutting the wood, so you don't want to remove more than about 1/8 of an inch max, depending on the wood you're using. Really it's 1/16, 32nd of an inch is about all you're going to take off. And so you have these little sides, so you can adjust it from 90 degrees up to about 45 degrees. You also have little adjustable pins in here, so once you dial this thing in, you can set these little pins so that you can very quickly go back to the position. But we'll zoom in here and kind of show you how this thing works and how it shaves off. One thing was you do as you cut your wood, what you're going to want to do is cut it to a 45 within about 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch. Then you're just going to shave off little bits to kind of sneak up right on where you want it to be. What I like to do is make a mark, just put a little X on the ends, because it can quickly, you can kind of forget where you're at with it. So basically you slide this in. What I like to do is, if you've got something like this piece here where you got an overhang, always put that to the bottom. If I'm trying to do that to the top, as you come across and cut it, it's pushing down a little bit, so you'll actually tear that and you can damage it so it doesn't give you a nice clean cut. So if you have a protrusion like that, put it towards the bottom. Usually what I'll do is bring the blade over a little bit so that hits right up against it. Back it up so it's clear, get just a little bit of clearance, and then you're going to slide that across and cut it. So let's zoom in a little bit and show you what we got. So we can see both sides here. So I'm going to start on this side here. So what I'm going to do is bring this over so the wood As you can see right here, we've got the protrusion down below, so as it cuts across, pull the blade back a little bit, you can get a nice view of the gearing down here. We're going to slide that up just a little bit and then come across. And you see those little shaving, just how it shaves it off real nice. Now we'll come to the other side. Do the same thing over here. Just takes off a real nice, beautiful piece there. So now once we do that with all of the pieces, then what we're going to do is we're going to glue this up. You'll see how these just come together so nicely. Really, we don't need to clamp this, so all we're going to do is we're going to glue it, and we're just going to use some painter's tape. So as we put the glue on there, we're going to put a couple pieces of tape around the edge. Then we'll also put a piece across the top here like that. If you've got everything dialed in and lined up right, you really shouldn't have to clamp it. You just want something to kind of hold it in place. So we'll get this glued up and we'll show you what it looks like after that. It is time for the unveiling. So as you see, I use my table saw top as a work surface a lot of times. In fact, I've even welded on it and stuff, which is not a great idea. But so I put a couple pieces of wax paper down. I like using this surface because it is nice and flat, so it makes it easy when you're doing a glue up like this. I can use some of the other tables around and stuff, but this works really well. But put a little wax paper down so you don't get your glue stuck to it. So you can see the piece here, no clamping on it or anything. All I did was use the tape on there. So we'll get the tape off of here and kind of see how it turned out. Alright, so we've got all the tape off of it now, so we can really kind of inspect our corners and joints. Really pretty pleased with how that turned out. Nice and flat. The corners look real nice. You know, it's good and secure. Now I did use Titebond 2 wood glue. I've used this for over 20 years now. It's really good. I highly recommend it. Some of the glues foam up when you use them. Some of the Gorilla Glues and that you actually use water with and stuff will foam up. Then you got a little more cleanup. The Titebond I really like. I've used that for a long time. The Titebond 2 is a waterproof one. With that glue in there now, the glue joint is actually stronger than the wood around it. A lot of times if you try to break it, it'll break somewhere other than where the glue joint's at. So I'm not really concerned too much about the strength of the joint, although you do have to be careful with the glues that it is good temperature. If you go below, I want to say below about 65 degrees, you run the risk of chalking. So the glue will not set up right, and you go back and it'll actually come apart and it'll be kind of white in there. They call that chalking. And so the biggest issue then, you don't have to throw the glue out, but it does need to be warmed up then, and the material needs to be warm enough as well. So not a big problem here in Texas. But so a little bit of an aesthetic, but it would increase the strength of the corners a little bit. What I'm debating on doing, and I think I'll try to make a little fixture up here, is to just run the router with a 1/4 inch bit and just do probably a single cut across the corner here, and then so that would come across at about a 45, and then slide into that probably a piece of cherry. This is walnut, so the cherry would give a nice contrast. Glue that in, and then I can trim that flush. So it gives a nice little aesthetic to it. It will make the corner a little more secure over time. So I'm going to take a look into that and maybe make a little fixture up. If we do that, I'll show how that works. At this point, we can really kind of start to see how this project is going to come together, because we've got the frame now. So this is kind of exciting. We're finally to a point that we can really see how this is going to come together. So I did just a little bit of light sanding on here. We'll show some close-ups of the corners, because I did basically what they call bookmarking, sort of like bookmarking, but for the corners. So all of this was made out of a single piece of wood, and I kept them in order all the way around. So if you follow the grain, it actually follows all the way around. And sometimes that isn't real evident, but especially on this one corner here, you can really see the way the grain comes and goes around the edge. So it's just kind of a nice touch when you're doing a project. It doesn't always, isn't always evident. But now that we have this together and sanded, we can kind of start to see how this is going to work. Now, the glass hadn't been cleaned or anything like that, but I do want to kind of show how this will work. So it's going to have the lithophane in there. It'll have the actual negative of the print. Putting that negative in a slide holder just to make it easy to hold, and then we'll have the actual print in there. So to just kind of show what this is going to look like, we can kind of put it together a little bit here. So we've got the first outer piece, and I still have to make little spacers in there that'll hold that so that outer piece isn't right against the glass, but that goes in. Then we've got the middle piece. So now the middle piece goes in, and once the middle piece is in place, then this is where, so we have like the lithophane, that'll drop into one side, the negative just drops in to the middle, and then the actual print. Now with the print, we've lasered out some pieces of plexiglass, so those are just spacers, because obviously the print, we want to hold it securely in between, and it's not as thick as the lithophane and as thick as that center piece. So those will all go in together in there. And then finally the back piece, which kind of holds everything in place then, but has the holes cut so that the lithophane will let light through, and also you can see through on the negative. So once you have it, you can hold this up to a window or something like that, and so then you'll get the picture, the negative, and the lithophane all in one. So that's kind of exciting. I did decide I am going to do a little cut in each corner and add. Now this is walnut, so I'm probably going to do like a little 1/4 inch thick piece of cherry that will get glued into just on the edges here. So I kind of glued up this fixture here. I have not run it through the router yet. We'll show that because I want to get it all lined up first, run it through once, because this will actually provide some support to the wood here so it doesn't tear out as much when you run it through. But the general idea is that this will fit in here like that, and then we can just put it on each corner, and then this will slide through the router. So pretty pleased with how it's turning out so far. We'll get the router set up and get all the settings for that and show you that. Alright, so we got the router table set up, ready to go. I've got a 1/4 inch bit. Actually it's a 7/32 cabinet grade bit in here, so just a smidge under 1/4 inch. I've got that set up as high as it'll go, about a 1/2 inch. As you can see, I've got a pretty elaborate router table here. I've used a lot of different ones over the years, some ones that I've bought, some fancier ones I've built. At the end of the day, what I find just works well and it's easy to put away is go buy a 4-foot piece of countertop. There's just from like Home Depot or Lowe's, they sell, you can buy a piece of the countertop. Make sure it doesn't have a raised lip on it here. This one had a backsplash kind of edge built into it. I just cut it off. set it up for my table saw or my router to drop in. Just reach under, hit the switch, and turn it on. Pretty easy. Now I set up my fence here so that the bit is going to hit right in the middle here. You can see I did a few little passes here just to make sure I was centered, so I got that all lined up. So we should be good to go. I did use calipers to line up. You can get calipers pretty cheap now, even the nice, even digital ones for 20 bucks or something. They work really well to help lay things out and get things set up. So the only other thing we got to do is, before we start using any equipment, one, make sure always take off all your rings and jewelry. I mean, if you're going to rip a finger off, you don't want to mess up your watch or your wedding band. So go ahead and take that stuff off, get some earplugs in. And before we cut the actual piece, I've got a couple scrap pieces here that I did glue up into a corner, just to we'll do that as a first test, because I don't want to measure twice, cut once. We've measured a couple of times, and we're still gonna do a practice cut with it just to make sure everything turns out the way it is, because I don't want to have to redo the whole frame at this point. So go ahead and do this cut, and we'll evaluate. If it's good, we'll go ahead and do the other one. So we'll see if we can get a good view of this here, where it cut through. Let's get the shavings out of there. And so it cut through nicely. The walnut on the other side looks pretty good. So take it out and take a look. Yeah, that turned out real nice. So that so the plywood inside there, where you can see the notch, that'll actually provide some support for tear out as that bit goes through there. So that's what I'm looking for, is just a real nice little pocket. So what we're going to do is put a piece of wood straight down in there. We'll glue that in, and that'll provide a little additional support for the leg. Then we'll end up using a little Japanese pull saw. That'll cut it off nice and flush on both sides. Then we can sand all that in, and we'll have a pretty little detail with the cherry against the walnut. So let's go ahead and do the frame. See, all of those turned out really nice. There's nice sharp edges. I didn't get any tear out. So now all I got to do is get a piece of, even just a little scrap piece of cherry. We'll trim it down on the table saw to just about the right size I need, and then I'll just sand it to fit so that it squeezes in there nice and tight. Then we can go ahead and get those glued in. So our little tabs we added are pretty much dry. I think we can go ahead and cut those, cut off the excess. We're almost ready to start our final sanding and doing our finish on this. We did a couple things while we were waiting for the glue to dry. First is made 4 of these little walnut corner pieces. These are actually what's going to hold all of it together. You can see inside here we've got this groove that we cut in all the way around. So what will happen is once this is ready to be finally for final assembly, we'll slide those in, drill a little hole, and probably just put a little brass screw in there. So we'll have one of those for each of the corners. We just kind of sanded them down, rounded the edges. That way, if the glass ever breaks or something needs to be changed, you can get the whole thing apart. So the other thing that I did real quick was inside here, you can see I finally made the little walnut spacers that go around on the inside here. So these are just real simple little piece, but they do have 45 on the ends, so literally they'll just sit in there. We're not going to glue them in or anything like that. And all those do is that when this piece sits down in here against it, it's not sitting directly against the glass. So it holds it back just a little bit. So any stain or finish or anything like that doesn't end up getting on the glass and creating a problem there. So so let's go ahead and get all these pieces out and get the glass out of here. So those just slide out, and we'll get a piece of glass out of here. Get all this out of the way. Now we're going to use one of these called a Japanese pull saw. As you can see, they're real bendy, real flexible, and they work nice because you can, in the way the teeth are on there, they don't protrude off to the side at all. So you can literally saw something off flat. So if you're doing like a plug, a little wooden plug in something, you can lay this down flat on it and cut right across. We're basically going to do the same thing with this here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just kind of hold this down a little bit. See how it works. And then, so I'm just going to put this right against the edge. Just real gently, not forcing it at all. Just take your time with this. So now we'll show you. So that just gives you a real nice flush finish on that. So we'll do the other side, we'll do the other 4 corners and show you what that looks like. Then we'll be able to start sanding those. By the way, I did not use cherry for those. These little inserts, I used some Texas pecan that I had. Thought I'd give a little nicer contrast to the walnut with the lighter from the pecan. So go ahead and get the rest of those sewn off. So we're really getting close on this thing. It's really coming together nice. Pretty happy with it. So since the last shot, got a few things done. I'd sanded it to about 120 grit. Put a light coat of just a natural stain on it. Helps give a little bit of depth to the wood color. It also helps seal it. Walnuts are really kind of a brittle wood. It splinters pretty easily. It's really dusty. It's fairly open grain. So I put a little bit of the stain on there to help seal it a little bit. Now I want to take it up to about a 400 grit. It's probably a little more than I need to. I'm going to start with a 220 with the random orbital, go up to a 320, and then I've got some 400 that I'll finish off with the 400 by hand. And then at that point we'll be ready to start putting the finish on. I'm going to use this Watco Danish oil finish on it. We'll see how many coats that takes. It'll probably take 3 or 4. My goal is to get first coat on it today, let that one really soak in, and then we'll put the subsequent coats on. One other thing that I did do, just with when I lasered these parts out, where the laser cuts, it kind of burns that edge, and I was getting quite a bit of soot off of that, and so you can kind of see where I had taped all the way the edges, and then I just used some flat black paint. I sanded that first and then used a little flat black paint on there. I didn't want any of that soot or anything coming off and getting on the pictures or anything like that. So I did that. So these will get sanded as well. It's good when you sand to use, this is an old sanding pad. It's getting pretty dried out and stuff, but you can just use any sort of your cabinet liners work great. So just something to give a little bit of a padding so stuff doesn't slide around too much when you're sanding it and stuff. Eventually we'll replace that. Open to any sponsors, Watco, Quarter Cable, anybody out there listening. Norton sanding discs. We're also using some Mirka discs as well. Those all work pretty well. So anyways, let's get sanding. The big day is finally here. We are ready for final assembly. It's very exciting. We got about 2, maybe 3 coats of the Danish oil. Put on, let it soak in, dry. Gave it a little sanding in between there. So a couple coats of that. And we just used the natural. We didn't do any of the stained ones. Then put on a nice coat of paste wax, rub that in, gives it just a really nice smooth finish to that. And so really pleased with how it turned out. Joints look really nice. The little detail on the corners gives it a nice little touch. Didn't do anything fancy with it, just kept everything nice and square. Just took the sharpness off the edge, but yeah, let's go ahead and get this thing, start putting this together. So we're going to use, this will be the top of it. So let's get that flipped over. First thing we want to do is get the glass put in. So we've cleaned that nicely and trying to be careful just to touch the edges. Next is our spacer. So these actually, so this is just going to provide a little bit of standoff between the glass and the first layer that goes in. These will actually just sit in there. They're just a little bit snug. We'll get our first piece in, so that'll be what faces on the outside. And you see I got little arrows marked on some of these for just which side I want it as the top. Get that in. And our middle piece here. Now for the fun, so the back piece, when it goes on, it'll go on like that. So this side will be where we want the lithophane. So we have the lithophane, and when we printed that, we actually printed this trim part to be the same thickness as the that middle portion, so 5 millimeters. So that one fits in nice with no additional spacers or anything like that. A little bit different for our picture and the negative. So we used some of this thin acrylic and cut the pieces. So we're actually going to drop one of those in. Then we have the actual negative that we used for the print, and then put that in a slide holder, mainly just because that was a convenient way to be able to work with that negative. Also then on the laser we just made a few paper spacers because it was still a little bit loose even once we put the little acrylic spacers in there. So we're putting acrylic on the front and the back because you'll actually be able to touch that. Then on the picture side, I'm going to do the same thing over here. Don't need to do the acrylic necessarily on here, but I'm doing this mainly so that the picture itself is sandwiched nice and flat. So then we have the actual picture we'll put in there. And again, we needed a few paper spacers and also just used a couple extra pieces of acrylic in there. These ones obviously not going to be seen, so I'm just going to leave the coating on there. That way, if at any time they should ever need to change the picture out, or the original acrylic gets scratched or hazy or something like that, they'll actually have a couple extra pieces they can take out and swap out. So then our last, actually, see, I did this wrong. So we're going to switch these here. So I did my pieces backwards here. So we're just going to switch it real quick. Now we're good. Put that on there. The last thing we have to do is made these little spacers, countersunk the holes, and these are what kind of hold it all together. They slide in, then into the little that little notch we had on the side. So again, gives kind of a nice, easy way down the road. Should the glass break or anything like that, they can get it all back apart, nice and neat. Make sure those are all in nice and tight. Make sure things lined up. Alright, so now finished product. So we've got the picture on there, the negative we can hold up to the light and see, and the lithophane, got the glass, little spacer behind there. Again, turned out really nice. The back, that same groove that these little corner pieces used to hold everything together also creates a nice little lip, so if you do want to hang it on the wall, kind of creates its own picture hanging edge there. So yeah, overall really pleased with the way that turned out. Hope you enjoyed it.